And our last presenter before the break is Cynthia Hsia. Cynthia was a data analyst at Fiat Chrysler Automobiles before coming here, but she decided to pursue a different passion. She started over and found herself in the Bahamas chasing and tagging sea turtles, bonefish, and sharks. I remember when we were considering Cynthia's application in our admissions committee meeting, and I remember that Dale Squires, noted Southwest Fisheries Science Center economist in particular, was a strong advocate for admitting Cynthia, in spite of the fact that her background was largely on something besides marine conservation. He saw the incredible potential of applying her complementary skill set, particularly in economics, and bringing that to this program and bringing it to the cohort. And Dale was right. It's been incredibly valuable having you here, and it's been really fun to see the way that you've applied that skill set to this project in particular. So Cynthia's project is called Being Green, Leveraging Behavioral Decision Research to Drive Sustainability in the Surf Community.
Thank you, Samantha. When I was younger, I was obsessed with this TV show called Numbers. And it was about an FBI agent who teamed up with his mathematician brother Charlie on the right, who used math to solve crimes. They were successful, but Charlie also realized that sometimes you just can't use a hard science like math to try to understand and accurately predict human behavior. That's just because humans are messy. We do what we want, when we want. It doesn't always match up with their likes and dislikes. It just depends on the situation. For my capstone, I felt a little bit like Charlie. My background in academics, in undergraduate, is in decision science, an interdisciplinary academic field that tries to understand how people make decisions and how to optimize that system. Decision science recognizes that people don't always make the best decisions for themselves, and the way we make decisions is not straightforward. We can be emotional, impatient, and impulsive. For example, when we go to the grocery store when we're hungry, we tend to spend more money and buy more unhealthy food than when we're full because we underestimate how much our visceral states influence our behavior. But simply giving more information or providing more incentives isn't always effective at changing behavior. It's how you present them that matters. Insights based in decision science have largely been untapped in marine conservation, so one of my goals for this project is to create awareness for this potential tool going forward. So I partnered up with Sustainable Surf, a nonprofit organization, to apply my background in behavioral decision research and try to answer the difficult question: how can we get people to make better choices for the environment? They're pursuing this answer through the lens of surfing. Surfers and surf culture have the potential to be a powerful force and influence behavior change because they are stakeholders who already have a vested interest in their ocean playground. Surfing is also the #1 sport that teens and young adults want to learn, so this makes it a platform to influence those who have never surfed before or even seen the ocean. The most critical environmental issue facing us today is climate change. We're frequently exposed to images of its effects and messaging that tries to change our attitudes and subsequently our behavior. In fact, mitigation will require individual change on a global scale. However, the effects of climate change are invisible, diffuse, and long-term. We don't get immediate or tangible feedback from our actions. For example, we know that burning fossil fuels contributes to harmful greenhouse gas emissions, but we don't always think twice when we leave the lights on when we leave a room. This implies an attitude-behavior gap, or disconnect between what people say about their attitudes and what they actually do. This gap is large in sustainability issues, often due to things like mental, financial, or educational barriers. It's difficult for people to break through their entrenched behaviors despite having climate-friendly attitudes or intentions. With that in mind, I created an online survey using a decision science perspective to get a better understanding about how individuals in the surfing and broader communities make sustainable lifestyle choices and identify the barriers they face to doing so. I extended the survey to people who don't surf under the assumption that surfers are more likely to engage in climate-positive behaviors than those who don't, due to their already direct relationship with the ocean. The survey was distributed by Sustainable Surf partners, including the World Surf League, the Inertia, Lonely Whale, Surf Dome, and Allison's Adventures, and was also distributed to UCSD students here at the Behavioral Lab through the Rady School of Management. In total, I received 735 usable responses, and I separated them into 3 different groups: surfers, surf-curious, and general population. Surfers are those who surf, and surf-curious are those that I defined as people who don't surf but are interested in surfing in some way. they watch surfing online, for example, or they follow professional surfers on social media. General population was defined as people who don't surf and are not interested in surfing. In the survey, I asked respondents about their engagement level with 10 different sustainable lifestyle behaviors. These ranged from small to medium actions like composting or shopping locally that, if done consistently, can reduce one person's carbon footprint. If they have a low engagement with a certain behavior, I asked them about that barrier they face to participating. And finally, I asked about their climate change beliefs and who they hold responsible for mitigating climate change effects. Overall, I found that surfers are more likely to engage in these sustainable lifestyle behaviors than the surf curious and the general population groups. For instance, shopping locally, composting, biking as primary transportation, and using energy efficient products. Although they still cite barriers to actions, they are more likely to break past them. For example, 90% of surfers use energy efficient appliances or products, at least sometimes or more, compared to 72% of the surf curious group and 68% of the general population. On the other hand, actions like recycling, using reusable water bottles, and using reusable shopping bags had over 90% engagement across all groups. So in general, I found that behaviors are more likely to have higher overall engagement when they're smaller actions versus actions that require more time, effort, and higher upfront financial costs, such as driving an electric vehicle or using public transit. This may be related to a concept called perceived norms, which is an individual's perception of what other people think that they should be doing in a certain situation. For instance, Dr. Robert Cialdini, a researcher, conducted an experiment in the Petrified Forest National Park to try to prevent visitors from stealing petrified wood. He found that communicating peer-approved or disapproved behaviors was most likely to reduce theft. This type of feedback has been really successful in prompting pro-environmental behaviors and may be a force at play in this situation. Overall, 82% of respondents believe or strongly believe that an individual's choices or behaviors can help protect the environment. And 97% of respondents or people close to them have cited that they have experienced at least one extreme weather event in the last 5 years. However, when asked to rank how individuals hold up into being responsible for mitigating climate change effects, an interesting difference becomes apparent. Surfers rank individuals as the most responsible, while the surf curious and general population groups rank them as last. This reinforces the data that I found, and it can be explained by a few things. Surfing is an individualistic sport, so surfers may inherently see themselves as having more responsibility. And the low ranking by the other groups could be due to something called optimism bias, or the tendency for an individual to experience or think that they're going to experience a negative event less likely than another person. Because they don't have a direct relationship with the ocean, they may not link their actions with climate change effects. The survey results also enforce the attitude-behavior gap that I mentioned earlier. To address this gap, targeting behavior is actually more important than targeting attitudes, because attitudes and intentions do not necessarily translate into behavior. This takes us into the concept of self-signaling, which arises when individuals are influenced by their own self-beliefs through their actions. While we think that our choices are likely to be influenced by our personality, our character, our attitudes, the reverse is actually also true. The choices we make shape how we see ourselves. For example, every time we recycle, we signal to ourselves that we are someone that cares about the environment. Strengthening behavior then not only reinforces attitudes and closes this attitude-behavior gap, but skips it entirely in itself. So overall, the data shows that surfers are more likely to be engaged in sustainability solutions, and surfing's influence as a sport and a culture is also far-reaching. Surf stakeholders like brands, media, competition platforms, and surfboard shapers have the ability to be a leader in sustainability and to help its followers catalyze the transition to a more climate-positive lifestyle. If surfers can set an example by making more consistent sustainable lifestyle behaviors, and the surf industry can help their followers catalyze the transition to make more behavior changes, the combination of these two can be a powerful influence on the surf curious group in particular, because even though they don't surf, they are still invested in surf culture. So to help surf stakeholders improve their messaging and target behavior, I formed a list of potential behavioral interventions that can help guide individuals towards making the better choices for themselves and for the environment. The first I call baby steps, or simplifying the ask. When trying to reach a complex or difficult goal like solving climate change or even something like composting, replacing it with an easier and simpler ask will help them create small, easy, and concrete tasks. This helps people take the first step, which then signals to themselves that they are someone who cares about the environment. And this first action becomes an on-ramp to more sustainable and more larger sustainable commitments. And we can see this already happening with actions like recycling and using reusable products. So surf companies can promote reusable products like bags, kitchen items, and laundry goods to help customers break through their entrenched behaviors, avoid single-use plastics, and feel like they're contributing to a solution. To reinforce good habits, it's also important to preempt inconsistencies. Acknowledging that people are going to make mistakes and help them correct for that will help surf companies anticipate and correct and help create consistent habits. For example, forgetting your reusable water bottle or your reusable shopping bag in your car or home is really common. So before entering a retail store, surf brands can create signage to help remind customers to bring in their items. And finally, people don't have perfect information, but just providing more information isn't always effective because it can have different effects on behavior depending on how that information is delivered. People need relevant and meaningful feedback at the time of a decision, like when they're doing well or when they could be making a better decision. Surf businesses can use this as a platform to increase their transparency and explain specific sustainability impacts upon checkout. So this shares their direct personal benefits and indirect community benefits, which can help directly link consumers' actions and purchases with a specific environmental or social benefit, especially since that link can sometimes get lost in translation. Overall, these may help address the attitude-behavior gap and mitigate climate change effects. And more research is needed, but I hope these interventions can serve as a foundation to understanding how we can all ultimately create a more ocean and climate-friendly world. I would have never guessed that a TV show would have guided my master's project so much, but it's taught me some valuable lessons. Our planet needs all of us to be its caretaker, but humans aren't perfect. We need new tools to understand the human dimension of conservation issues because we are a huge part of the solution. And before I wrap up, I'd like to extend a huge thanks to my committee members, Kevin Wilden, Dr. Eilette Neasy, Dr. Gregory Bourne, and to Samantha and Risa for being such a huge guidance and mentors throughout this year, and my cohort, family, and friends for their love and support. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?